Okay, hello everyone. My name is Cory Cuffley, and I'll be your next presenter here today. As you can see from the screen, the topic of this section is going to be retirement plans for nonprofits. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot of information out there with retirement plans. I could probably talk for a few hours on this topic, but I'm going to try to make sure I keep us, within our time constraints here today. And most of the topics that we'll cover are going to be at a high level, so I'm not going to try to go too in depth with anything. But please know at the end of the presentation, I'm going to have my contact information. So if there's anything you need more clarity on or have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'd love to talk with you about them and help you through any questions or issues you might be having. So before we get into the material, I'll just give you a little bit of background on me. So again, my name is Cory Cuffley, and I'm a manager in our retirement plan services group. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our group specifically within SEK, we are a third-party administrator, or TPA for short. So just think of us as like your accountant for your retirement plan. We, as a group, administer over 400 retirement plans across numerous industries, and that can be for profits, not for profits, governments, and so forth. So we do have a pretty good amount of experience across our group. Um, I personally joined SEK in January of 2024. I'd actually been here previously and took a little bit of a detour for a few years, but now I'm back working in the retirement plan services group. Overall, I have about 6.5 years of experience working with retirement plans. Um, I do have a bachelor's degree from Bloomsburg University and a master's degree from Villanova University. Um, I am the detour I referred to earlier was actually I went and became a financial advisor. But when I was a financial advisor, I specialized in retirement plans specifically. Um, so that helped kind of give me a more broad picture of the industry as a whole. And just a little fun fact, I did serve in the Pennsylvania National Guard from 2011 through 2017. All right, so here's a list of the topics we're going to cover today. So I know it doesn't seem like a lot of topics, but believe me, there's a lot of information that can be found within each of them. So again, I'm going to try to keep us on pace here and try to keep everything at a very high level. The first point we're going to kind of talk about is going to be the retirement plan options for nonprofits. So obviously, I recognize that many people on the you know call today may already have a plan. So at the very least, maybe some of these are ideas of things you can research with your own plans. But certainly, if you don't have a plan, hopefully this will help guide you in the right direction. Secure 2.0, I just wanted to go through a couple of the provisions. That's the Secure Act 2.0 is a pretty significant piece of legislation in the retirement plan industry, and it has varying degrees of implementation. So I just wanted to touch on a few of those so everyone's aware. Excuse me. And then the last piece that is I'm going to probably spend the least amount of time, which is plan document restatements. So it's more or less just kind of an FYI, making sure everyone's aware of what's coming down the pike for 401k and 403b plans as it relates to their plan documents. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the material we have today, which is retirement plan options. So the first couple slides here are going to be the various types of plans that nonprofits have available to them. And as I said before, I'm sure many of you have plans, but if you don't, hopefully this is some helpful information as you're trying to navigate this landscape here. But the two plans that you see on the screen here are going to be your two main plans that I think most people think about when they think of retirement plans, which are a 403b plan and a 401k plan. Now, I would say historically, if you were a nonprofit, you had a 403b plan. That was just kind of par for the course. And it was almost kind of, I think people thought you had to. It was the only option you have. So not many people are aware that, the nonprofits can actually have 401k plans. But rules and regulations have changed over the years where, these two types of plans are actually very similar. So when it comes to a 403b plan, you're going to have an employee component and potentially an employer or an organization component to it. So from an employee standpoint, and these are 2025 numbers, employees can save a max of $23,500. And if they're age 50 or older, they can do an additional $7,500 for a total there of $31,000 per year, at least for the year 2025, into a 403b plan for themselves. Those contributions can be pre-tax or Roth, provided your plan allows for the Roth component, but they can be either or a combination of the two. What's interesting about a 403b plan is they can be either ERISA or non-ERISA. So with ERISA, that's kind of what drives a lot of the requirements within a plan. So if you think about things like, okay, what can eligibility be? What kind of notifications need to be sent to participants and when? Those types of things are all driven by ERISA. And 403b plan can be an ERISA plan or a non-ERISA plan. And I have in parentheses there what kind of drives a non-ERISA style plan, which is, the employer doesn't have an employer contribution and there's minimal involvement from the organization. So those plans certainly exist. But when we start to talk about, the administration of these plans, a non-ERISA plan, as you can imagine, has a lot less, really not much at all administration that's required from the organization standpoint. And if you're interested in curious about your plan, I would just check with your TPA. They can certainly tell you if your plan is ERISA or not ERISA. Within a 403b plan, you can actually prescribe a lineup of investments so that your employees can choose from a certain investment lineup. But just know when you compare the investments within a 403b plan to a 401k plan, the 403b plans tend to be a little bit more limited in what they can offer just by regulation. And the investments just tend to be a little bit more expensive compared to a 401k plan. One interesting thing about a 403b is there is an additional catch-up that is available if your plan document allows for it. So it's certainly something you want to look in your plan document for. But for employees with 15 years of service with the organization, they actually have an additional catch-up that's available, but that's unique to a 403b plan. Also unique to a 403b plan is you do not have to have the actual deferral percentage test or the ADP test. So when I mention administration, when it comes to 403b and 401k style plans, there's always annual administration that has to happen just to make sure no one in the plan is getting discriminated against, and everything's following the rules. But what's interesting is one of the tests, which is the ADP test, that is very prevalent in a 401k style plan, is not in a 403b plan. So a 403b plan does not have to adhere to the ADP rules. And effectively what the ADP rules are, or what the ADP test is it is a test to look at, what does a highly compensated employee defer compared to a non-highly compensated can defer. And there's a permitted disparity there between the two. So now let's jump over to the 401k plan. So a 401k plan is similar in a lot of ways. You have the same employee deferrals that are available. They can be pre-tax or Roth. There's tend to be a wider range of investments available to them that you can get in a 401k plan that you may not have available to you as in a 403b offering, and the costs tend to be lower as well when it comes to the investment standpoint. Well, 401k plan tends to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to things like plan design, especially with eligibility, determining who can enter my plan and when. So if it's something you want to be a little bit more creative with your eligibility, it's certainly something you may want to lean towards the 401k with. And 401ks are subject to ERISA. So I mentioned earlier, a 403b can be either one, but a 401k is absolutely subject to ERISA. So you're going to have a lot of requirements there in terms of what you can do and the notifications that need to be sent out. Now looking at the some additional plans that nonprofits have available to them. The next two plans are actually IRA-based products. So most people are familiar with IRAs, which are individual retirement accounts. An IRA is something you can have yourself at a bank, financial advisor, something like that. But it's something that's not organization related. But there are two products, both a simple IRA and a SEP IRA, which are kind of organization retirement plans, but it's a collection of IRA accounts. So just a little bit different of a structure. So starting first with a simple IRA. So simple IRA is something for organizations with 100 or fewer employees. So, certainly not the large mega organizations. Um, and what the simple IRA does is it's similar in a way to the 403b or 401k plan in that the individual has the ability to defer themselves, but then there is within a simple IRA a mandatory company contribution. So um, when you talk about 401k, 403b plans, there is the possibility to have, discretionary contributions that you may or may not do year to year from an organization standpoint. But just please know with a simple, there is a mandatory contribution that you have to give. And it can be a match or a non-elective contribution, but it is mandatory. Um, so with a simple, so you might be thinking, okay, why would you want to put yourself in that situation where you have to give a contribution? You have maybe a little less flexibility with things. And the main reason is likely cost and administration. So with a simple IRA, there's no administration to do on a year-to-year basis, like a 401k, 403b. So there's sort of plans that you set up and they just kind of run. And they are very low cost. They tend to be extremely low cost in certain circumstances. So both obviously, you know, things that you would want to consider when looking to set up a plan. One interesting note with Secure 2.0, simples are now allowed to have Roth contributions, so employees can actually save in a Roth account. Previous to Secure 2.0, and what people are always been familiar with is that simple IRAs are only pre-tax, but those actually can now be Roth. The other kind of I would say drawback to the simple is my last bullet point there. But with the employee deferral piece, what you'll notice is the limits are a little bit lower. So as opposed to the 401k and 403b, where an employee can save, $23,000, 23,500 rather, on an individual level, within a simple, it's only 16,500. And the catch up is lower as well. So, depending on if you have, the decision makers or some, people within the organization that want to, get significant dollars in, that might be a limitation as well with the simple. The other IRA product is what's called a SEP. So a SEP is similar in that it is a collection of IRA accounts, but in a SEP, it is only employer contributions. So there's no employee deferral aspect to this. Again, it's very inflexible, very cheap, um, uh, but inflexible still. And some people, some organizations may not like the idea that the employees can't save their own contributions into the plan. But the company contributions within a SEP are discretionary, so you don't have to give them year to year. In fact, you can do it one year, not do it the next, and so forth. But just know that it needs to be uniform. So if you give an employee, 5% as a contribution, everybody gets 5% as a contribution. So again, that's kind of the inflexibility there. And the last one here, and I'm not going to spend much time at all on this one, but another plan that you will find nonprofits utilize is something called a tax exempt 457, which is usually a tack on to a plan that you already have. So it's a separate plan, but it's in addition typically to another plan, and it just tends to give a select group of people, usually high income earners, the ability to save additional funds. So maybe the plan that you have in place isn't quite meeting their needs and their desires, but from an organization standpoint, it's great. This is a plan that may allow for additional savings from their side that might kind of be a benefit to the organization. So some things to consider. Again, whether if you're an organization that's looking to set up a plan or maybe thinking about changing your style of plan, certainly size your organization. So how many people, especially on the administrative staff, do you have? So keep in mind a 403b, a 401k plan does have annual administration that they need to adhere to. So notifications need to be sent out at various times. People need to get into the plan when they're supposed to get into the plan. So things need to be looked at a little bit closer, I would say, in those types of plans. So certainly, you want to make sure you have the staff to accommodate that. Plans such as a non-ERISA 403b, SIPLs, and SEPs, there's virtually no administration there. So those are a lot more low maintenance style plans. If you don't quite have the staff to support that type of an ERISA style plan. Investment options, again, this really comes into play if you have folks that are really focused on investments, or just want a lot of different options and they want to make sure costs are low. The 401k is likely, of all the plans, going to have the most flexibility outside of maybe one of the IRA products, but even still, you might not be able to get as low cost there. As opposed to the 401k plan, but it's certainly a consideration. This one's interesting. The number of highly compensated employees. So if you remember from earlier when I was describing the 403b plan, I said the 403b plans don't have that ADP test associated with them. And what this point is getting at is, if you have a lot of highly compensated employees, and for reference, in 2025, that's anybody making more than 160,000. If you have a lot of highly compensated employees, it may be worth, or it may make sense to look at the 403b, because you don't have that test, and that's where some plans can get caught up. In a 401k plan that's not a safe harbor plan, if you have a lot of highly compensated employees that are looking to maximize their personal savings, if you're subject to the ADP test, you have to consider what everyone else is saving to see what, in fact, those highly compensated employees can do. So because the 403b plan doesn't have that, it may make sense for organizations that have large numbers, or a good number of highly compensated employees. Cost is another thing to consider. The 401k plans and 403b plans are going to have higher costs because they have a lot of year-end administration. So they have folks like myself as the TPA. You'll see on the second bullet under cost there, other things that you should be aware of that you're likely paying for, or someone is paying for. In addition to the TPA is the record keeper. So, where the money sits, where participants go to interact with their plans, and so forth. Investments, now that's usually a participant expense, but it is something to consider. So each investment is going to have their own cost. And a financial advisor. So if you have a financial advisor attached to your plan, that is a cost. So just understanding, who's paying for that, and is it a reasonable fee for what you're getting out of there? So, but again, all of the different plans are going to incorporate these different individuals in different ways. Certainly TPAs aren't really required on a SEP or a simple, so that that doesn't come into play as much there, but certainly the record keeping investments and advisors can be a factor. So just be aware, simple SEPs obviously very low cost. And then flexibility. So depending on how creative you think you want to be with your eligibility, and maybe company contributions and so forth, the 401k plan has a lot of flexibility embedded within it. And just keep in mind, simple's very cheap, but the least flexible of the options. It's kind of you have it this way or you have it that way. There's usually no in between. And I want to wrap up this section with just some ideas of ways to maximize your plans. So again, this is going to be for people who already have plans in place or are considering making plans, or starting up a plan, I should say. Things to consider. And some of these aren't necessarily just, for things like attracting and retaining talent, although some of them are. Some of them are just to make sure you're maximizing your plan in general, and some ideas there. So number one, just make sure your eligibility is reasonable. So again, this is kind of goes both ways for bringing in new people or the folks that you have there now. One thing that we hear a lot from employers is, they're trying to hire people and they're concerned about how long they have to wait to get into the plan. So just make sure it's reasonable. Maybe take a look at your peer group and see what they are typically doing. But I think there still are plans that particularly 401k plans that have, a year wait and semi-annual entry. So it's, not inconceivable in those types of plans that someone could wait, close to 18 months to enter your retirement plan from when they started their employment. But I think that's becoming a point of emphasis for a lot of people. So people are thinking about their retirement more, so they don't want to wait those long periods. So, take a look at that, make sure it's a reasonable amount of time. Also consider entry. So, people become eligible, but then they have to wait for the next entry date. So just make sure both are reasonable. Uh, this is more for plan health overall, but just consider automatic enrollment. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the Secure 2.0 section. But just consider, if you don't have automatic enrollment, maybe adding that provision. What we find a lot of times is that with participants, if they don't get in when it's their initial entry period, um, a lot of them don't get in at all. So it's not something they keep revisiting, maybe as much as they should. So automatic enrollment's a good way to get people in and help them kind of increase their participant outcomes, or get kind of further down the path of achieving those types of goals. But and it just makes the plan overall healthier. Company contributions, again, it's kind of that juggling act of, how much do we put in someone's pay versus how much do we contribute to their plan. It is a question that does get raised, especially if you're looking to attract new talent to the organization, is how much does the organization contribute? So certainly looking at your peers, seeing what, your particular area tends to do, whether it's a match or whether it's some type of non-elective contribution, just trying to keep that, in line, with your peer group. And just know, one of the benefits to a company contribution as opposed to pay is that, if your excuse me, if the money goes into a retirement plan, you don't have the payroll taxes associated with a paycheck contribution. But I fully recognize it's not that easy because you also have people who want the pay, and they don't necessarily recognize the long-term benefits of the retirement plan. So it is a juggling act there. But do to just take a look and make sure it's a reasonable contribution. And my last point there is, if it's a non-safe harbor plan, and I didn't get into the safe harbor versus non-safe harbor today, but if it's a non-safe harbor plan, you actually have a lot of flexibility over how you design that contribution. So it can be a very unique matching formula, that meets the organization's needs, but also kind of boosts that employee participation as well. So just something to take a look at. And then investment options. It's always a good idea to just make sure you have a good variety of investment options available to your participants, and making sure that the costs are reasonable. So, on the investment record keeping side, it's kind of been a race to zero in terms of fees. And participants are cognizant of that, and they're digesting a lot of information out there in the world, and investment costs are being mentioned more and more, or brought up more and more. So just make sure you're reviewing your investment options. And I have on here, consider a financial advisor. It's certainly, if you already have one, great. If not, maybe something to think about. But a financial advisor attached to your plan can do a number of things, like certainly making sure the investments are monitored the way they need to be, but also it can be a value add to participants. So if you have someone that new is going to join the plan, you can say, great news, we're making this company contribution, but we're also giving you access to a financial advisor. Or even if you're not making a company contribution, we still have this financial advisor fully available to you to help with your personal needs. And then the very last thing, total compensation statements. I like to throw this in there when I'm talking about just kind of ways to improve your interactions with employees and participants. But if that's not something you're doing currently, maybe something to consider. A total compensation statement is just a document that reflects, for your employees, hey, this is the total um, uh, investment, essentially we have in you as an employee. Because as you as employers know, it's not just the pay that you're giving the employees. You're also paying, payroll taxes, towards their, Social Security. You may be making a retirement plan contribution. You may be contributing towards their insurance. So the actual investment you make in the employees is much more. So it kind of helps to bring that in perspective, maybe a little bit, for your employees. So just something to think about. A lot of times your payroll providers can do that for you. So, um, so yeah, so if you have any questions on that, again, please feel free to reach out. The next section, so a bunch of different pieces to this, but I'm going to go through it as quickly as I can. But I do just want to make everyone aware of a few things. So Secure Act 2.0 was a significant piece of legislation that passed a few years ago. And the next couple slides are going to have a couple of the provisions I just want to bring to everyone's attention. So the first one is long-term part-time employees. Hopefully by now you've heard of this term and are aware of it. This is um, a rule that basically is designed to allow more people to participate in plans. What the rule is an employee who is age 21 and has worked for you for at least 3 consecutive years of 500 hours, they should be allowed into your plan to defer. So this doesn't affect company contributions. This is strictly an employee's ability to save themselves. Excuse me. And that 3 years was reduced to 2 years as of 2024. It is consecutive years. So if you have someone that, kind of bounced around and, maybe 1 year has it, 1 year doesn't, it doesn't count. So it does have to be consecutive years. The service for a 401k plan, though, is disregarded before 2021, and service for 403b purposes is disregarded before 2023. So the overarching effect of that is 2024, the calendar year 2024 was really the first year that 401k plans or sponsors of 401k plans saw long-term part-time employees become eligible for their plans. And then 2025 would be the first year that a 403b plan would see long-term part-time employee enter their plan as well. So just be cognizant of that. Make sure you're keeping an eye on that, especially for 403Bs, because there's a unique rule with a 403B called universal availability, which effectively means, if one person in your company can defer into the plan, everyone should be able to defer into your plan. However, there was an exception that some 403Bs will use where they say, anyone who works less than 20 hours a week are, they're not allowed in the plan. So this would actually override that. So even if you have that rule, you still need to be aware long-term part-time employees are there. And, if it's not something you're talking to your TPA about, please make sure you do and make sure you're tracking those. And I skipped over the first bullet there, but just be aware this is only for ERISA style plans. So if your 403B is a non-ERISA 403B, it won't be affected by the long-term part-time rules. A couple of the other ones. So age 60 to 63 catch-ups. So this is a unique catch-up. As I mentioned earlier, if you were age 50 and older, you could do an additional $7,500 as a personal deferral beginning in 2025. So this is the first year for it. That $7,500 is increased to the greater of $10,000 or 50% more than the regular catch-up amount. And I put in there because it's a formula like it is. For 2025, that amounts to $11,250. So only for folks that are in the 60 to 63 window. For 2025, your catch-up is increased to $11,250. Catch-up contributions is Roth. So this is something that was supposed to go into effect a few years ago and it got pushed back. So it's not effective until 2026. So not until next year. But effectively what this is going to do is anyone who is of catch-up age and is looking to make a catch-up contributions, if they made over $145,000 in the prior year, those catch-up contributions actually have to be Roth. They'll no longer be allowed to be pre-tax. So I did make a note that we just need to make, we would want to make sure your plan allows for Roth contributions, or it needs to potentially be amended to not allow for catch-up contributions. So it's just something to look at. But I know a lot of providers are working towards making those changes for next year. Involuntary force outs. So this has always been a rule, but if anyone leaves your company with less than $5,000 in the plan, you can actually force them out. And that's actually helpful from an administrative standpoint so that you don't have to continue to track them and send them notifications and so forth. That 5,000 was increased to 7,000. So now anybody who leaves with less than $7,000 can actually be forced out. Simple IRAs, historically, if you wanted to change from a simple IRA to another style plan, you had to only do that at the beginning of the year, so January 1st. Secure 2.0 now allows for you to change from a simple to a safe harbor 401k plan in the middle of the year, and that's very specific. It has to be a safe harbor 401k plan. Qualified student loan match. So this is something that was talked about for years, which is the idea that uh, kids today have so much student loan debt. So if your organization was offering a matching contribution, they weren't able to receive that because all of their money is going to pay student loans. They don't have as much money to contribute to their retirement. So this actually would allow, if you elect it within your plan, would allow for you to treat those student loan payments as if they were contributing to your plan, and then you can do a matching contribution for them. So again, it's a unique provision. I don't know that we have anyone that's doing it, but it is something that many places were interested in doing. So it's worth a conversation if you think it could work for your employee base. Automatic enrollment. So all plans after December 29th, 2022 has to have automatic enrollment. If your organization is less than 3 years old as an organization, and or you have less than 10 employees, you are exempt from that mandate, or if your plan started before that date. So, but otherwise, if you start a new plan, you have to have automatic enrollment. That has to automatically, or the automatic enrollment has to be 10%, or it has to start at 3 and get to 10. MEPs, multiple employer plans, and pooled employer plans, won't spend much time on. Essentially, these are just groups of different organizations that decide to contribute to the same plan. Historically, nonprofits and educational institutions were not eligible to do that, but now with Secure 2.0, they can. Hardship withdrawals, the Secure 2.0 expanded the sources for hardship withdrawals. So 403B plans traditionally couldn't include earnings in a hardship withdrawal. Now you can, and you can also do self-certification, and that's for hardship across the board. But hardship distributions historically, you had to gather support for them. Now you can just rely on the participant to say, yes, I did incur a hardship. Qualified charitable distributions, QCDs. This is something from an organization standpoint, if you're not promoting, it's something to maybe consider. Gone are the days where you can take, kind of larger charitable contribution deductions on your personal tax return with the changing of the tax rules a few years ago. This is something that is new that allows people to actually write checks directly from their IRAs to their charitable organizations. And in doing so, the distribution is actually completely tax-free. So I've seen it a lot with folks that have to take required minimum distributions. So they may not need them, but they have to take them because they're required. Now they can actually write a check directly to their charitable organization of their choice, and it satisfies the RMD, and they don't have to pay tax on that distribution. So something to make sure you consider. You can see that they can be quite large, such as 2025 was the total someone can do is $108,000. Just quick on RMDs, you probably are aware RMDs actually increased to 73, which was a bump up from 72, and it will continue to increase into the future, but not until 2033. Startup tax credits. So retirement plans or organizations who start a retirement plan are eligible for a few years to be able to write off a significant amount of the costs associated with starting up the plan. So it kind of helps and incentivizes organizations to do that. Unfortunately, nonprofits don't typically have tax liabilities to write that off with. So one of the things, this isn't approved yet, but it's something that's moving kind of through the channels, is the idea that nonprofits should be able to start up a plan and use the credits to offset payroll taxes. So just keep an eye on that. We're certainly going to push more information out as it becomes known, but that is something that's working its way through the channels. And then qualified birth and adoption distribution, something you certainly can offer as an organization. Effectively, any distribution that happens out of a retirement plan early before age 59 and a half tends to have an early withdrawal penalty. But if you offer this provision in your plan, you can actually avoid the penalty for up to $5,000. So anyone who goes, gives birth or has an adoption can actually tap into the retirement account for that. So I know that was quick and it was a lot of information, but certainly if any questions come up about Secure 2.0, please feel free to reach out. And this again, won't spend much time on this piece, but I just want to make everyone aware. Every 6 years, the government makes you, if you have a 401k plan or a 403b plan, restate your document. So as you can imagine, over the years, things happen, regulations change, people decide to amend their plans. So they have a plan document, and then they have all these ancillary documents kind of building. And what the government says is, hey, you have to consolidate those. We have to get those into one document again. So those are referred to as cycles. So with a 401k plan, if that's a plan that you have, the next restatement cycle is cycle four. It's the fourth iteration, and that begins in October of 2026 and it runs through August of 2028. So what this is going to do is it's going to restate your document. It's mandatory. So if you haven't been contacted by your TPA, which you may not have at this point, but you will, that just be aware that's kind of what this relates to. The new document for 401k plans should include most of Secure 2.0, but it's not going to include all of it. So despite the whole purpose of this, you will still have a Secure 2.0 amendment on the side. With 403b plans, this is actually they're in the midst of cycle two. So hopefully, if you have a 403b plan, you're aware of this one. This runs through January of 2025 all the way through December of 2026. It's the same concept, but because it started so much sooner, the new document for 403bs is going to include most of Secure 1.0, and it won't include very much of Secure 2.0. So actually, for 403bs, you're going to have a much larger Secure 2.0 amendment. But the Secure 2.0 amendment, all of those different provisions we talked about in the previous section, that's where that gets memorialized. So right now, it's just kind of getting, you want to keep track of what provisions, our plan is adhering to, so we do it correctly. But that formal amendment isn't due until the end of 2026. So again, just be aware that those things are coming. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to your TPA. But if not, you can certainly send them our way, and we'd be happy to uh, talk it through with you. But with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up. I know I went a little long, so I apologize, but it was a lot of information. My contact information is on the screen now, so please feel free to reach out. You can send me an email there, or you can give me a call. Happy to kind of talk in more detail through anything we went over today. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the presentation.